So are we or are we not going to get a tax cut? Here's another question. Who is going to get a tax cut and eventually wind up paying higher taxes if the current GOP plan passes? Joining us for more is Joe Gruder, Sarasota Republican Chairman and State Representative, Susan Nylon of the Nylon Report, and Zach Anderson, political editor of the Herald Tribune. So Joe, I mean, look, we have a long way to go in terms of tax reform here, but more and more, analysis of the tax packages in both the House and Senate are pointing out that the upper middle class are getting relatively few benefits and the disproportionate number of tax hikes eventually. What are to our viewers, are the hardworking middle-income viewers on the Suncoast who watch this, and they see that, and also that GOP tax plan gives private jet owners a tax break? What are they to make of this?
Well, it's not just asset owners. You know, one of the benefits of being a business owner is buying assets, being able to depreciate it, both new and now they're talking about some used cars, other things. But at the end of the day, I could tell you more as a CPA than anything else. From thousands of returns that I've done over the years, when I study what's being discussed, I actually think the biggest winner will be the lower middle in a lot of ways, because of the way they do the deductions, the way they get rid of the exemptions, increase the personal deduction. So if you're renting, you're a W-2 income earner, you're going to hit the jackpot, probably make $1,000 or $2,000 a year extra. And I can tell that's not a political statement. I'm telling you as a CPA. From a political standpoint, yes, there are some other things in there that will help. My guess is the business owners and the upper class members of our society. But you got to remember, I think 1% of the people out there gets taxed for 50% of all taxes paid. And the problem is if you have any tax cut, right, 50% of the people aren't paying any taxes. So if you have any tax cut, yes, the top 50% will benefit more, because the bottom 50% doesn't pay any taxes at all right now.
You have this look on your face right now.
Now remember, I'm a CPA, so it's hard to argue taxes with a guy who understands.
However, there's a lot of gray area in between that a lot of people are going to get, walloped with this terrible tax bill. I mean, look at the graduate students and the potential of what it's going to do them. It's going to devastate the research and development area, because graduate students won't be able to afford to actually be in graduate school. Look at you talk about the 1%, 300 millionaires actually signed a letter saying, do not do this, do not pass this bill. We don't need these tax cuts. So, and you know what, you always talk about the percentage who don't pay taxes. They can't afford to pay taxes because they don't make any money, and that's why they don't pay taxes.
That's right. I agree with you.
And that's not going to change.
But they're not going to lose anything with the tax bill.
Zach, let me ask you this, because everybody wants a tax cut. Nobody wants to pay as much as they do right now in terms of taxes. But when you hear these reports about that, the sunsetting of the tax breaks that help the middle class, does that resonate with folks here on the Suncoast, or is all they hear tax cut?
I think there's a little bit of both. I think the GOP, a lot of it is going to depend on how the GOP is able, and their allies are able to sell this plan. Whatever opinions of it now are not necessarily what the opinions will be, after it passes or come election time. There'll be a huge media campaign to spin this and sell this. But right now, what people are seeing and what they're hearing is that this really benefits the wealthy and corporations, and that it doesn't benefit them as much. And that's reflecting in the polls. Only about 30% of people on average support this plan.
Real quick.
Hold on.
Okay.
Let's just take a break, and we'll be back with more on the GOP tax plan right after this. We are continuing our conversation about tax reform, and joining us for more is Joe Gruder, Sarasota Republican Chairman and State Representative, Susan Nylon of the Nylon Report, and Zach Anderson, political editor of the Herald Tribune. And we should also point out that Joe is a CPA. But Joe, what do you make of the provisions of the tax reform packages right now, that the corporate taxes are a permanent cut, but the tax cuts that benefit the middle class will sunset after 10 years?
Well, and a lot of tax cuts end up being sunsetted, or initially are put into law as a sunset provision, but at the end of the day, almost all the things that are sunsetted on a yearly basis get renewed at the very last second.
But that depends on what the political climate is at the time.
That's it. But in terms of the corporate taxes, one of the main things that we have to do is we have to encourage businesses to grow. Small business is the lifeblood of our economy. Certainly these big multinational corporations that have all their money parked overseas, we want to continue to bring them in. Manufacturing, everything else, everything depends on our ability to get workers to work, make them productive, and at the end of the day, I think that the American people will win. And I will tell you, from a personal standpoint, I think that I lose on this tax cut because anybody who has a couple of kids who's able to take those larger exemptions will be punished. If you have a smaller family, small W-2 income, you know, you will make out. And at the end of the day, what I wanted to say is, you don't always know, just like the Obamacare, when somebody said you won't know until we pass the bill. Voters won't always know because they don't necessarily believe the spin that's being said on both sides until they file their taxes next year. And when they file them, they're going to know either I'm going to save $1,000, $2,000, or I'm going to pay more. And if you're, I'll tell you, the average middle class family out there, if they end up saving $1,000 or $2,000, they're going to vote for the Republican Party because they want to keep more of what they make.
Susan, you're jumping out of your seat.
I am, because I want to focus on the word if. That's exactly what he said, if. And why would we want to wait to see if we got a tax break, if it benefited us? The middle class supports the economy. The middle class, I don't care whether it's a lower, middle, or upper middle class, I'm so thrilled that we're dividing those into little sections. But the truth of the matter is we can't stand the strain anymore on us. You want to talk about small businesses? Who has the small business but the middle class? You know, the fact that you can't tell us for sure that we're going to get a tax break is really disturbing.
Well, let me say this just real quick. When you say if, it's every single person's individual tax scenario is different, so you won't know until you personally go file your taxes.
Zach, and then I have a question.
And Joe said, the wait and see, that once people see their tax cuts, that's going to be a good thing for Republicans. I think it's a bad thing for Republicans in the short term if people can't figure out this bill. It's so complicated, and they don't know if they're going to get a tax cut until sometime probably after the 2018 election. That could be a big issue for Republicans come election time. If you remember the George W. Bush tax cuts, everybody got a check in the mail for a certain amount of money because I believe it was a payroll tax cut or something like that. So that was a very easy thing for people to understand and to appreciate. This one is a lot more difficult
Joe,
and complicated.
What happened to your obsession with the balanced budget, the amendment? I mean, Vern Buchanan said that was his #1 priority since he was elected, and this budget reform, this tax reform, whether you support it or not,
it depends on who you talk to in D.C. And yes, with the current rules, the way they do that, yes, this will create $1 trillion deficit in addition to what we already have or what we're expecting. What I think is I'm still a true believer that by stimulating the economy, by putting more money into people's pockets, that money will then be spent and will continue to help out, and as a result, those numbers will trickle down.
Let's talk about the politics of getting this passed for a moment. And again, I don't, Joe, how does it help the president's cause to send up a tweet like this about Jeff Flake, who we know the president is not a huge fan of, but he is a Republican? The president says Senator Jeff Flake Lee, who is unelectable in the great state of Arizona, quit race, anemic polls, was caught purposely on mic saying bad things about your favorite president. He will be no on tax cuts because his political career anyway is toast. If President Trump wants this tax reform package passed, he's going to need Jeff Flake's vote.
Donald Trump, what he said with that tweet's exactly right. The guy needs to get on board. Who is he to challenge
why would Jeff Flake
our
vote
president of the United States, who our Republican Party nominated, who our country supported? This is one of his main agendas. People should get on board.
Right.
Flake will get on board, I think, at the end of the day, because at the end of the day, it's the right policy. People deserve to bring home more money of what they make. We can't tax people we can't tax people to death and expect people to continue to move on. People are tired of other people getting a free ride.
Trump did the same thing during the health care debate. He was attacking John McCain, who didn't buckle and ended up voting against the bill anyway. This really could backfire him. Sometimes putting pressure on people can get them to vote the way you want, but somebody like Jeff Flake, who has nothing to lose, why is he going to do that? I think with Flake, though, you know, he is somebody who has very conservative principles, who probably truly believes in this tax cut, and I doubt that he would let whatever Trump says influence him. I would assume he'll probably vote for the bill regardless, but, you know, it is an interesting tactic that the president is using.
But John McCain, like he did during healthcare, said regular order, and he has said statements even this past week saying what we're seeing now is not regular order. Joe, it's hard to imagine, given what the president has said about John McCain, that John McCain is going to vote the president's way.
Well, let's hope that he does, because at the end of the day, John McCain was our presidential nominee a couple years ago. He was a conservative at one point. We need people to stand up and unite with the president. We're one united party. This is one of the president's main agenda items. This is very important for our country. We need these tax cuts to move forward. And I think that the McCain, Flake, anybody else who wants to go against the president, they're doing so and they're making a big mistake.
Susan, let me ask you this, because you know, it's one thing to oppose a policy like tax cuts. What you don't hear out of the Democrats right now, whether you're in the Senate or the House, is what's your idea?
You know, and they could just be so overwhelmed with a tax bill they don't have one. You got to remember, this is an issue of the Republican platform. This isn't an issue of the Democratic platform. So they're actually being...
Democrats want to raise taxes.
No, they don't.
Go up.
No, they don't. But, you know, I could say the same thing about the Republicans on many, many issues. They finally had the House, the Senate, and the presidency, and yet they can't actually accomplish anything. And yet for years, all we did was hear about the better plan that they had, and yet where is it? So,
Zach, what are the implications for the Republicans if this does not get passed?
It's hard to say, but I think they're very concerned that they at least want to shore up their conservative base, and that they feel like if they don't have that going into the 2018 election, then it could be a real massacre potentially in terms of the electoral results. And I think they're worried that you know maybe even the Senate could be in play if it looks like that they can't pass anything. In terms of whether they're going to win over independents or things like that, that's really a lot of it depends on how the bill is presented. And right now, like I said, the polls show that it's unpopular, but I think the real push and what they're really concerned about is making sure that they keep the base happy and motivated come 2018.
Okay, we're going to take another pause there. We'll have final thoughts on the GOP tax plan right after this break. Final thoughts on tax reform. Joe, I mean, put your political rainmaker hat on here. I know how you feel about the tax plan, but with a 1 or 2 vote majority in the Senate, your prediction whether this gets done?
I'm confident that the Republicans will unite behind our president and pass this tax cut that's much needed for our economy to keep it growing. People are seeing more money right now because our economy's been doing so great, and I think this will continue to move that way forward.
Susan?
You know, Joe keeps referring to a unified Republican Party, and we know there's nothing unified about the Republican Party, and I'm confident that they won't pass this tax bill because of all the problems that are in it.
Zach, I mean, given the fact that you have people like Corker in Tennessee, who is a deficit hawk, John McCain coming from where he is, Susan Collins of Maine, does something in some form get passed so the Republicans can claim victory?
I think it's quite possible. I was actually surprised when they put in the Affordable Care Act, the repeal of the individual mandate, into that bill, because that didn't pass already, and obviously it complicates the equation in the Senate. So I thought that actually lowered the odds of it passing. But they're already talking about potentially pulling that out, and I do think politically they feel like this is a must-do for them. So I think the odds are probably better than even that something passes.
If you were to give the president one piece of advice in terms of how to handle his Twitter as we head toward votes from the Senate and conference committee after that, what would that be, Joe?
Keep on doing exactly what you're doing. You're doing a great job, Mr. President.
So no more shots at Jeff Flake, John McCain, Bob Corker.
I said keep on doing exactly what you're doing. I think he's doing a great job. That's how we got elected. That's what the people want to see. The problem is when you're going against the D.C. swamp, these establishment guys who have been so used to dealing with the special interests and nothing besides their own are having a hard time Trump is pushing back. He's going to change this country for the better, and all middle-class Americans are going to be a big winner by the time he leaves the presidency.
Susan?
I just want to refer Joe's reference to the D.C. swamp. I want to know all your friends that are a part of the D.C. swamp. Representative Vern Buchanan is a part of the D.C. swamp.
Happy Thanksgiving,
so,
Susan.
you know, I just think they really need to rethink their position.
Well, you know, Zach, in terms of Vern Buchanan, Tom Rooney, the other members of the congressional delegation right now, has anybody voiced any kind of either opposition or criticism of these plans as they stand right now?
Well, Vern Buchanan voted for it in the House Ways and Means Committee and on the House floor, and so did Tom Rooney. I mean, the House, you know, the Republicans are pretty united behind this bill, and they're really emphasizing the big picture, you know, everybody gets a tax cut aspect of it.
Okay. Before we go, we want to share with you what some of you think about the GOP tax plan. President Trump needs a win badly, and it looks like the GOP tax plan may get passed, so we went to Facebook and to hear what some of you have to say. Kevin says Congress Bipartisan Joint Committee on Taxation estimates that 80% of the cuts will go to corporations, wealthy people, and small businesses. So where does that leave firefighters, teachers, and other middle and lower class workers? Helene says powerful people should never prey on the less powerful. Trump is as much a predator as others name, but he remains unscathed. That is so wrong. Well, if you'd like to join the conversation about tonight's topic, just visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/suncoast.com.abc7. FYI, you can watch past discussions on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. And a reminder, you can get all the latest local and national news on our smartphone app. But if you are an Apple iOS user and have the old version of our app, it will go away at the end of the month. iPhone users, you can find the new app by searching My Suncoast in the App Store. The app will update automatically for Android users. And we want to thank all our guests for being here tonight. Joe Gruder, the Sarasota Republican Chairman and State Representative, Susan Nylon of the Nylon Report, and Zach Anderson, political editor of the Herald Tribune, for joining us tonight.